Welcome back and to our session on capturing the value of connectivity. We have a fantastic panel to discuss this today, but first, just a little bit of housekeeping. Please ask questions whenever you like through our session. These will be fed through to me, and we will have a little bit of Q&A at the end of this session. I am Malcolm Moore. I am the FT's Technology News Editor, and joining me today for this discussion, I have Anya Ernest. She is Exploration Lead at Polestar, the electric vehicle company that grew out of Volvo and is now set to make a public markets debut next year. I have Heidi Himmanen, who is at the Finnish Transport and Communications Agency. I have Johannes Springer, who is at the 5G Automotive Association, and I have Eduardo Ustaran at Hogan Lovells. Right, so what we have really is a panel with particular expertise on all sides of this debate, from the automotive industry, obviously from government, from the telecom side, and also Eduardo specializes in privacy. Let's begin the discussion by talking a little bit about where we are headed. Anya, can I come to you? Can you tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about connectivity at Polestar, what sort of opportunities you see there, and where you see us going in the short and medium term?
Yeah, I think when it comes to connectivity, it's not something that I myself think so much about. I think it should just be there, and it's a foundation for innovation and service design. As we move along and start using products, our expectations change with that. And when we get a new car now, we expect it to be connected. And obviously with that comes a bunch of new services. And how we look into the future is trying to predict it through like user research and also exploring through setting up hypotheses and designing for those. But we can't do it obviously without having a connected car and the service ecosystem that surrounds it. So yeah.
Okay. Now, obviously, expectations, as you say, are changing very rapidly. The sort of cars that people are looking for today are totally different from what they were looking for just a few years back, and so it's difficult to look into the future. Having said that, what do you think the expectations will be in terms of connectivity, in say 10 years' time? Can you sketch out for us how you think consumers will be thinking about what services they want?
I mean, 10 years ahead, imagine where we were 10 years ago, 2011. Did we even have the ability to stream films via the internet? I mean, so everything has changed dramatically, I would say, since then. So looking 10 years into the future, I would say that we just need to keep listening to what our customers say, but also what they do and how the ecosystem of business is evolving. Obviously, looking more towards autonomy within the car, that it takes care of itself, but also how we can make use of these resources also when it's not moving about. So what we would like to do with this room is up to us and the customers to explore.
Right. Okay. But let's say a reasonable base case will be there'll be very widespread electrification. Hopefully, a lot of people will be using electric cars, and hopefully also a lot of people will be connected via 5G and connected to their cars, and hopefully cars connected to each other. And indeed to other forms of mobility. How do you see that evolving? What sort of services might we think about when cars are connected to each other and to other forms of mobility?
I mean, a lot of the times when I think about what I do for the customer, that is very short term, obviously within a couple of years. But then looking into how can it fit into a greater ecosystem, like the society? How can this be an add to society rather than a consumer of society? How can this balance the grid, looking at the car as a battery? And how can what type of services do we expect? Well, if we use this as a room, if we can jump between, like we're going to take ourselves from one point to another, then having it connected in an open and self-organizing mobility as a service.
Okay. I'm coming to you now, Heidi. You're the chief advisor at the Finnish Transport and Communications Agency, and I know that you look particularly at promoting wireless communication and connectivity across a range of sectors. You're looking presumably much beyond just cars at the entire sort of ecosystem. Can you give us a little bit about how you're thinking the shape of the future?
Yes, thank you. So, yeah, I work with 5G and wireless connectivity, and also with transport automation. And I think I see connectivity as a horizontal, cross-sectoral thing. So we have many challenges similar for all transport modes. And what are the needs for the quality of service, the coverage, and the reliability, and so on. I see, well, we are now in Finland, we have very good 4G networks. We have 99% of the population covered and most roads and railroads covered, almost all roads and railroads covered. And we have 5G for enhanced mobile broadband for 25% of the population coverage. So we already have good connectivity, and the question, and we would like to see that the commercial networks build the basis also for the digitalization of mobility. And then the question is, how can we fulfill these commercial networks where they don't meet the needs of mobility and the future automated transport, but also what are the needs, because we don't know actually the needs for reliability, for example. The reliability question and the resilience is as important as security and trust. We cannot go only on best effort as the services are today. So we see that we need actually to understand the needs of the different use cases and different services. I mean, for example, a very challenging use case from the perspective of the communication network is a remote control based on real-time video. It has to react. You should react on the remote controller immediately, and we should have very good video resolution. We cannot do this for a huge amount of users today. Those are the cases where we need 5G, and we need the reliability and the high bandwidths. But then we have a lot of use cases we can build them on today's technology. So we need to discover more what is needed, and really I think to build on the commercial networks. That's our view in Finland. But then you need to find out how to build out in those specific parts of geographical areas where these services are not enough today. And now we have just started to build out the enhanced mobile broadband, but lots of 5G, new 5G features are yet to come in the coming 10 years. Thanks.
Of course, of course. So we'll come to that issue of a moment of how the network needs to change. But before we come to that, Heidi, let me ask you from a what role do you think a country or a government can play in setting out the strategic vision here when we're talking about a future where all sorts of possible services are available, and indeed it's unclear what form of mobility consumers will gravitate to? How do you go about sort of setting the framework, and how does the government set out a vision there?
Well, today we have coverage requirements actually for roads and railroads in 4G and 2G already. So that's the basic coverage. But we try to be involved in the discussions and development, R&D and innovation to understand what is really needed. As we are the agency, the regulator of both transport and communication sectors, we have a quite an outstanding role here to be able to promote different ways of solving these digital infrastructure questions also in the future, because it's kind of difficult when the physical infrastructure that is handled by the public sector in at least in our country meets the commercial markets of the communication networks, and what can be expected. So we need to promote cooperation and competition in good portions here.
Okay. Johannes, coming to you, Heidi talked a little bit about this move from best effort to a different model. How do you think the telecoms industry is adapting to that, and what is going to incentivize it?
Now, of course, one very important incentive is always a business case that is clear. But maybe coming a bit from a different end, and that was also the reason why we founded our 5G Automotive Association as a communication platform between the telco sector and the automotive sector. Because as Anya has said, connectivity is a must-have in all the vehicles. Nobody talks about. Everybody takes it as a given. And if it's not working properly, then of course the customer is frustrated. So that is, I think, that is a clear prerequisite and a clear starting point from the whole discussion. And if the automotive industry and the telco industry is discussing together how the networks of the future should look like to make a service environment happen, which creates a reliable and resilient connectivity channel to the vehicle, as Heidi has requested. This is exactly what we are discussing in the 5G Automotive Association. So 130 members around the globe are sitting together from the telco industry. So all the telco operators, all the car manufacturers, including Volvo Cars, for instance, and others are members of this association. And this is an ongoing task. And use cases like teleoperated driving or remote control, what Heidi has mentioned, is one example, one service example, where we are discussing how a mobile network should look like, that these use cases can be performed in a reliable and resilient way. This is definitely not the network as we know today. Of course, there are masts, there are antennas, there are fiber to connect the whole thing. There is a big core infrastructure, a big computing network infrastructure to manage the whole thing. But the software components to do this are definitely very different from those we know already from the 4G networks. And with the upcoming 5G standalone deployments around the globe, we will see a lot of features and functionalities where the network operators will offer to the customers, to the clients, to the car manufacturers, but of course also to other road operators or to other service providers in the transportation industry to make these use cases happen.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about how you think it should evolve? How you think connectivity should change between here and say 2030?
I think the first of all, a very important topic is that if we are taking for today a connected car, there are hundreds of services which are running in parallel in this connected car. Yeah, the customer is doing various things, the passengers are doing various things, the driver is doing some things, the car is doing a lot of things, the infrastructure is communicating with the vehicle continuously. So, various use cases are running in parallel. And of course, all these use cases have different priorities. And we need to organize the connectivity channel in a way that those services which need a high priority because it's safety relevant, or it's relevant that the car does not stand still because it's remotely driven, as Heidi has explained, that these services get the priority compared to services which have more a convenience aspect for the customer. For instance, a Netflix consumption of a video with a high resolution has definitely not the same priority like a safety information or a safety alert, which needs to be transmitted to the vehicle properly in time and in place. And this is something where we enable our networks so that the various applications are getting different quality of service needs. Then, of course, the whole latency plays a very important role. So the network operators are bringing more and more compute power into the networks, which enable the whole infrastructure to provide computing facilities for low latency services. Then, of course, the beauty of the C-V2X ecosystem is that we can, of course, communicate not just via the network, but also in a direct communication mode. So we have a lot of capabilities to exchange data directly peer-to-peer between the vehicles and between infrastructure. And finally, connectivity is not just a communication channel, but is also, I would call it a sensor, a measuring point, where you can provide information about position accuracy, and also position reliability. Everything with moving objects means you need to know where exactly the object is with a very high position accuracy. And that is also a very important feature of our upcoming mobile networks.
Okay. I mean, it sounds to me like there are so many different stakeholders across, our future sort of mobility system. I'm just wondering again how we bring all of those stakeholders together, especially not just across one form of transport, but across lots of different forms of transport, some of which have yet to be invented. And of course, you can have common standards, but yes, I guess again this is a question for Heidi, which is who is sort of responsible for coordinating all of these different stakeholders and achieving the benefits at the other end.
Yes, thank you. I think what Johannes said about their role and the role that they have taken is very important, because that's the companies and the industry needs to collaborate. I mean, between sectors here to find the solutions. But the role of the government and the regulator is then to see that the legislation is there, it's enabling the new things, and also if we cannot find solutions, then to do some, to find means to find these solutions. And we even have coverage requirements now for roads and railroads. This is an example of the first steps that we have been taking, but we need to discuss with the operators. We have enabled also local spectrum to be able to build local networks. This can also be utilized for mobility services. So we need to find the ways, and I mean, the government and the authorities can play a certain role, and we have very proactive role that we have taken in Finland. But of course, it's up to the industry to find the solutions. We tried to bridge the gaps between the industry and the regulation, and also between different sectors.
Okay.
And
Anya,
Malcolm, if I may, to add one point, which is from our perspective as an industry very important. The car industry is a global industry. So it makes no sense to have some regulation in one country which is completely different from another regulation in another country. So the cars are sold in 200 plus countries around the globe. And that is also the reason why 5GA is a global association. So we are working on standards, and we are working on collaboration platforms which work in a similar way, regardless of whether we are talking in China, in South Korea, in the US, in Brazil, in Europe, in South Korea, in Japan, or elsewhere around the world. So that is also very important, because to make this, let's say, individualization for each single market in the car happen, that will not work, and that is really a pain point for the car manufacturers.
Yeah. So just on top of that, Johannes, of course, the car industry is a global industry, but every different location has its own economy, has its own consumer demands, has its own transport requirements. Does this mean then that everything is slowed down to the pace of, the widest possible market at all times?
And we are trying exactly to do the opposite. Individualization and personalization is also something which is a benefit for the customer. And the customer does not want to pay a standardized environment which can be not personalized to his own, let's say, individual needs. And these individual needs are needs from the individuum, but also, of course, special needs or of a certain market where the customer is moving. And as long as these individualization and personalization aspects are maintained by software, you can do it quite easily. You have very good environments which you can personalize. That's your individual phone, which can be personalized to the individual needs of the customer around the globe. But from a technical standards in terms of connectivity, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of reliable and resilient network consumption, as Heidi has requested, that is something we need to make sure that the standards are available in a global harmonized approach, as we know already and as everybody is perceiving out of a 3GPP ecosystem. So the mobile network standards are working in the same way, regardless of China, US, or Europe. So you can rely on the fact that if you are jumping out of the plane, your mobile phone works immediately. Of course, hopefully you have the right subscription in the phone, but if this is the case, then it works properly.
Okay. Eduardo, I want to come to you now. Now, you are the global co-head of Hogan Lovells' privacy and cybersecurity practice. So actually, there are two areas I'd like to ask you about. The first is actually on the cybersecurity side. What is the potential risk of this highly connected ecosystem that we are aiming for? And then, coming again to the privacy side, I'd be keen to hear how you think, our existing framework of regulations is suitable for this vision of the future, and how it needs to evolve. I guess again, privacy regulations are varied by location, but we could talk a little bit about GDPR and beyond. But first, the cybersecurity issue. How much of a problem is that?
So, cybersecurity is one of the greatest challenges of our time, whether we're talking of mobility or not. In the context of mobility, of course, lives are literally at risk if security is not guaranteed. And I think the automotive industry has perhaps an advantage in knowing what safety is all about. So, our advice to clients in this sector is to approach cybersecurity as if it was part of safety, because that's the best way for the players to understand it. Um, Cybersecurity is an evolving risk as well. The ransom attacks of last year are in the past, and the ransom attacks of this year are new. And I think that is an important aspect of how we address these issues, in the sense that we cannot make the assumption that we have dealt with data security or cyber security at the development stage, and then we can just assume that everything is fine. It's always a work in progress aspect. And the law, in a sense, doesn't really need to evolve that much in that respect compared to the previous issues, because the law, in a sense, is very technologically neutral, and the law will say, well, if you are dealing with issues to do with connectivity and data and cybersecurity, you just need to ensure that there are appropriate technical and organizational measures in place, and those organizational and technical measures will adapt to the challenges. So the law is in a sense, is there and is clear for the future. It is the ability to address those challenges, again, not just at the development stage, but on an ongoing basis, that requires the industry to apply that safety first approach that is applied to many other aspects.
I mean, given what you've seen in just the last year, how nervous are you about the idea of connecting up, every vehicle out there in the world, even flying cars and drones and everything else, and creating such an enormous attack surface? I mean, you say, let's make it part of safety, which I think we can all agree with. But is this a road that we should be traveling down at all?
I think you cannot stop technology. Technology will continue to evolve, and the services we all want to enjoy are there to be enjoyed. I think it is compatible, this technological development is compatible with addressing the data security and cybersecurity issues that we are facing. I think, again, the industry has enough experience of dealing with safety at large. I think the issues around connectivity, of course, is that the vulnerabilities are there, and the techniques that we've seen in other industries being used by hackers and bad actors doing cybersecurity attacks and ransomware attacks will if be used against devices, whether those devices are on our desk or are moving on the motorway.
At high speed. Anya, let me come to you then. Obviously, at Polestar, you've opened up your platform. You're looking for third-party developers. What are the potential risks that you might be concerned about in having an open ecosystem rather than a closed one?
And here I think it's super important to distinguish between here, because we have an open ecosystem on top of our on our platform, and this open ecosystem is a layer that is with Android Automotive and Google Automotive Services. So it's not we did not just open up the entire car and let anyone in. I think
Sure.
what you say, Eduardo, I mean, cybersecurity and security and not taking risks is key. I mean, that's part of our DNA. So it is a big, yeah, it's very important for us.
Okay, but there will come a time, of course, in the future when potentially your cars will be communicating with drones or communicating with trains or with buses, and perhaps those communications could be spoofed or changed, or I just wonder how you build a very robust system around that.
Yeah, so this is not what I build. So
Yes.
I'm putting my trust into the team that is working with this, and I feel very confident with that team. Looking into on all aspects. I mean, should we let people in, or should we let third party in, or should we keep them out? How do we communicate with other IoT? I mean, all of that is, of course, super important to make sure that exactly what you're saying is not happening. I read a paper just a couple of weeks ago about how we started off with the web and the connected services built on trust, that we trusted everyone not to take advantage of us, because it was a way for us to communicate and to reach each other. And now it has evolved, and with that we have to evolve and to make sure that everything that we believe is important and is carried in a good way.
Okay. Just coming back then to Eduardo on the privacy issue. Obviously, we've seen a lot of privacy regulation recently. Does existing regulation cover a world of much greater connectivity, of much greater, of all the data that's going to be generated from all of these vehicles of all different types, or how should it be evolving?
Well, existing regulation definitely covers connectivity in this context in which we are speaking. Some of the laws and regulations are new. You will all have heard of the GDPR. The GDPR is a fairly new framework of 3 years ago, and the good thing about the GDPR, for example, is that it's a framework that is able to deal with the risks of misuses of data and privacy intrusions in a way that does not get in the way of innovation. So we're talking about connectivity. That's mainly about innovation, what is happening today, and as we are saying, what will be the future in 10 years' time. So data protection laws that are effective in dealing with privacy issues are the ones that do not get in the way of innovation, are able to address the risk whilst innovation continues to happen and deliver the benefits. There are aspects of European data protection law that are actually quite dated, and it's interesting that we were talking about what's the future in 10 years' time, what the past was 10 years ago. Well, 10 years ago, the e-privacy directive came into effect across Europe. The e-privacy directive is more popularly known for the cookie law, the one that you need to, when you go to a website and when you open an app, you need to accept cookies. Well, this is the same law that requires that level of acceptance for the collection of data from a device, from a car. So the connectivity we're talking about, where the way in which we drive a car, or the location of our car, or any information that is stored in that vehicle, the ability to access that information, unless it is for the specific purpose of driving, that requires the consent of the individual, of the drivers and the passengers. So that is a law that perhaps is not really adapted to the reality of today. And that is that is an area for where the law will need to evolve and will need to assess, okay, what are the risks of accessing this information? What are the potential privacy intrusions? How do we address them? How do we deal with transparency in a way that we're still able to extract this information and use it to deliver better services and to let the technology evolve? So then we are in a transition where some of the laws are already dealing with some these issues effectively. Other laws will need to evolve.
But can I just add? I mean, the like GDPR is not has not evolved to hinder us in innovation. And I mean, I'm not arguing against you, Eduardo. I think I'm saying the same thing as you. It's not there to hinder us. It's there to protect the data owners, i.e., the drivers and the users. So I mean, and I think that is what is important. If we are kind and we say, this is the data that we would like to collect and this is what we would like to use it for, then our customers might or might not be willing to share it. But if we try to not have that transparency and try to kind of hide what we're working with and what we're going to use the data for, then obviously our customers will be more reluctant in sharing. And I think that is why regulation is important, because it will help us in our innovation and it will help our customers to be protected.
Okay. I'm going to turn now to some questions from the audience, and a great first question, and one that maybe Anya, you could help start us off on. And this is a question of, how will connectivity help drive a lot of the societal concerns that we have? So in particular, how do you see connectivity helping to drive sustainability or to help the climate crisis?
I mean, in many different ways. Just for one thing, collecting data and understanding how can we improve the usage or how can we optimize. Clearly also moving from designing a service to designing for a service ecosystem. How do we all connect and still develop our business models individually, possibly, but to see that we are not an isolated system. We need to be designing for this whole ecosystem. And I think when we start collaborating instead of competing about the customer, that is when it will become better from a kind of sustainability perspective as well.
Do you see more collaboration in the future rather than competition?
Clearly, yeah. I mean, having third party coming in is collaboration for sure. Looking into research projects that we're taking part of or the partners that we're working with, I see a lot of collaboration.
Okay, so then do you see the role of the car in society changing significantly?
Possibly. I don't want to give a straight answer to that. Probably. But perhaps making use of these resources where they fit the best. And what that means is up to the future to decide for us. But clearly we have some tasks that we will perform, such as moving a customer from one place to another.
Okay. Johannes, coming to you on the same question, really. How do you see connectivity driving the sustainability agenda? I think we've lost your sound, I'm afraid.
Okay, sorry. It has a lot of impact with regard to sustainability. I would like to give you briefly some examples. If you are communicating with the traffic infrastructure, you can pretty much more smoothen the traffic. You can avoid much more traffic jams, and this is something which reduces definitely the energy consumption in the overall fleet. Yeah. If you can provide maybe a second example via connectivity platforms that that other transport modes are available, and that the exchange or the change from transport mode 1 to transport mode 2 is a very low barrier. So it's a very seamless handover for the customer to jump out of the vehicle and to take the train, for instance, buying in advance a ticket and all these things, maybe even not needing a ticket, because Polestar has offered a mobility package which includes also tickets for transport, public transport, which is also something where we are discussing in the industry about. This is also something which is, of course, a way to create a more sustainable ecosystem. And there are various other examples where connectivity plays a very important role to connect the different transportation modes with each other and to provide an infrastructure for the customer where he or she can easily choose a transport mode for its convenience.
Okay. Moving on to the next question, and this is a tricky one. I'm going to ask you, Heidi, maybe to have a crack at it first. How do you quantify the value of connectivity? How would you go about doing that?
Yeah, that's a really tricky question. Well, I think you have to look at what is the value of 4G or 5G. It comes in economical, societal, and environmental values. So maybe we can have different kind of measures. It depends on the goals, but of course we can get better revenues. We can have more safety for people, and we can have an increase. More greener transports, for example, those examples that we heard now from Johannes and Anya. So I think there are different ways to quantify, and we also did actually environmental and a climate strategy for the ICT sector in Finland. I don't know, maybe we were the first in the world, and we also tried to look in what is the footprint of the ICT sector, because we cannot just save in one sector and then build a huge ICT sector consuming raw materials and electricity. So we try to quantify, but I think the goal would be to look at these different aspects.
Okay. Does anybody want to add on top of Heidi's
And
view?
an important quantification aspect, when it comes to safety, it's for instance, it's a reduction of fatalities, it's a reduction of accidents, it's it's a clear objective in each society around the globe to reduce these fatalities, and connectivity will play a very important role to that, and that is of course and needs to be quantified. And we are seeing already this effect of including connectivity also by regulation. If we have in the car industry the emergency call regulation, which is also, let's say, a service which is based on connectivity. Otherwise, the e-call is not received by the public safety answering point. And of course, you can measure, and you should measure this also in terms of value. But this is of course another value compared to productivity of the driver or productivity of the passengers, because they can consume services parallel to their normal drive, and this is then something where each of the customers is making its own productivity equation.
But also I think when we talk about value, one thing is clearly monetary value. If we look at the phones we bought 20 years ago, they were very limited, and therefore we didn't pay that much for them. Whereas if we look at the phones that we buy today, if we still want to call them a phone, obviously the connectivity and the kind of free to move around or freedom to move around with the services that have been built because they are connected increases the value or the willingness to pay for sure.
If I may add one sentence to that, if you think about what are the most valuable businesses today, they are data businesses. So the value of connectivity is the value of data, and that is very, very tangible and very visible.
Okay, we only have a few questions left. Sorry, we only have a few minutes left. So let me just turn to a final question from the audience. And I think it's one for all four of you. What one thing excites you the most about the future of connected mobility? Who would like to go first? I'm going
I can
to
go
pick
first.
on. Yes, thank you, Anya.
Yeah, so for me, it's just an opportunity to innovate and to explore, and that is exciting in itself. To have this new landscape, which is with a map that hasn't been drawn, we can have an idea of what's out there, and now it's up to us to create that map and travel in that area. I think that's super exciting.
Okay. Heidi? Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
Eduardo.
I
Did you
would
want to?
go
Heidi,
on, Eduardo.
please.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Yeah, I would agree with Anya because I mean there are so many opportunities, and I look, for example, the unmanned aviation is developing really fast, and it was something we didn't have earlier, and now it's developing really fast, and it needs connectivity, and maybe similar things will happen in road transport. So I see. I mean, it will change the way we move, and it will change the vehicles that we are using to move. So it's but yeah, I mean, we will in 10 years we will have 6G coming, and that will bring even more opportunities. So I see this as an exciting journey, and I don't know, there is a lot of work to do, and it doesn't end, it just continues, and there is a lot of things to yeah, I mean, advantages that we can also do then for our environment and our future lives.
Okay, Eduardo?
Connectivity is global, and I think anything that is global brings us closer with other people, obviously around the world. So I think that's a big something that I think should excite us all.
Thank you. And Johannes, the last word.
Yeah, very, very briefly, because our time is over. But in one sentence, quality of service is for me the thing which excites me most in the upcoming 5G infrastructures. As Heidi has said, and also Anya has expressed with various examples, we need to provide a quality of service and a reliable and resilient network infrastructure for various use cases. And this is already possible with 5G technology. And that's exactly what excites me most in all these connectivity discussions. Thank you.
Okay, we are out of time, but thank you very much, Anya, Heidi, Eduardo, and Johannes. For those of you who are watching, the session will be available to view on demand for 30 days on the FT Live website. And coming up next is a keynote interview with Alan Visser, the Chief Executive of Link and Company.